Dr. Christine Riordan is the first woman to serve as president of Adelphi University in Garden City, right here on Long Island. She is an internationally recognized expert in leadership development, team building, diversity, and inclusion. Prior to her current position, Dr. Riordan served as provost of the University of Kentucky with a student body of more than 30,000 students and 19,000 employees. She has been recognized for her leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic, both at Adelphi and across New York, as a guiding voice in her role as chair of the Commission on Independent Colleges and Universities. Please help me welcome Dr. Christine Riordan.
Good morning. It's hard to believe 7 years ago I started as president at Adelphi University, and as I think most presidents would do, one of my first activities was to walk around the campus and get to know everyone and know the departments. And I was doing a tour, it really was 7 years ago this month, of our science buildings, and I was looking at the labs. And it was great. I was looking at the chemistry labs and the physics labs, and then I got to the biology labs, and I was talking with one of the scientists about the work that she was doing. And on the floor, there was this ramp. And I was kind of just staring at this ramp, like, why would you have a ramp in the middle of your lab? And she says casually, she goes, well, that's the ramp where we actually take the fish and we measure how far they walk. And I was like, what? Wait, what? Walking fish? What are you talking about? Fish, like, I saw them upstairs in the tanks. And as I really started thinking about it, you know, as we are leaders and we think about who we are as people, I love this quote from Richard Branson: every success story is a tale of constant adaptation, revision, and change. Walking fish, who could have imagined? But basically the concept is that they weren't getting enough food and nourishment in their environment, so they started growing legs and learning how to walk. When we think about today's environment, the one thing we know that is constant is what? Change. Change is always going to be in our faces as leaders, as employees, as people. And the one thing we also have to be paying attention to is how we adapt and and thrive. I don't know if it was ironic or not, but I was in the middle of writing a book called Shift Happens: How to Adapt and Thrive in a Rapidly Changing World of Work, and the pandemic hit. Wow, it really changed the way that I was framing that book and some of the concepts in that book. I thought what I would do today is talk a little bit about some of the basic concepts and things that we really need to consider as leaders and things that we need to consider as we're moving forward in a rapidly changing world. I kind of reflect back to about 10 years ago. I had the opportunity to have Howard Schultz, who was the founder of Starbucks, as a speaker, and I was able to interview him. And he told a really compelling story. He, brought the company up, and I don't know how many of you stopped and got Starbucks this morning, or if you're Dunkin' Donuts fans or McDonald's fans, but certainly there's a lot of people who are Starbucks followers. And Howard was saying that, one of the things as they were kind of adapting their company, they started diversifying, they started getting into other types of things. And he realized at one point, he kind of stepped back as CEO and he became chairman of the board, and he realized that if they kept going down this path and not focusing on who they were as a company, they were going to go bankrupt. And it came to a crisis situation where he ended up moving out the CEO and came back in and took over as CEO, and he said, we really have to get back to the basics. And he did something that was just unprecedented at the time. He shut down every single one of the Starbucks stores and then pulled everybody back in for training. Now, you can imagine what the media was like. Everybody was like, Schultz has gone nuts. What's he doing? He's shutting down the stores. He's off his rocker. McDonald's had a heyday. They started putting out their dollar menu and coffee specials and everything else, trying to get that business. But at the end of the day, what he said was, we had diversified so much and we had gotten away from our core values that we need to pull it back in and refocus and readjust and change back to what we were. And at that point, the story continues where obviously Starbucks rebounded, didn't go bankrupt, and he was eventually able to step back out of the company as CEO and also as chair of the board. So as you think about, your leadership, I want you to kind of think about it from two perspectives. It's rare in a situation that we don't have to change as leaders to then be able to help the people that report to us change as well. So how many people in this room would say that they like change? Raise your hand. Okay, I didn't get one. Anybody? Anybody likes change? So why don't you think we like change? Why don't we like change? You have to be different. It's hard. So typically what we do when something's facing us, something comes at us, something in the environment changes, that fish, all of a sudden their nutrients went away and they had to adapt. They had an environmental, biological adaptation. Sometimes we have an adaptation like that as well, but most of the time it's psychological. We have to get our head into that game. So typically we're here, and maybe we need to be here. And we have to think about that path that's going to take us to this new place. I know that you're facing as many of the same kinds of things that are flying at you as I am. Technology changes. Certainly Sheriff Toulon is focused on analytics and crime statistics and how we actually go about solving crimes today, right? Technology is rapidly changing my industry, my university as well. It's going to be one of the biggest forces that's going to be changing all of the jobs that we know in the United States as well as in the world. Demographic shifts are coming our way. We have a majority non-white students as our first class this year. It is a demographic shift that we need to be prepared for. 25% of those students, their parents have never gone to college. A lot of first-generation students coming in. That's requiring all of us to be different. We're seeing kind of the demographic shift in terms of people retiring. I'm sure you're probably also having difficulty recruiting people in because we don't have as many young people who want to take different kinds of jobs, and they're being very selective. And that makes it very difficult. About 4 years ago, my son was a rising senior in high school, and he was a really good athlete, and he was a very good runner, and he attracted the attention of a lot of coaches. And so I had the opportunity, he started getting recruited, and one day in the summer in July, right before his senior year, I found myself sitting across the table from a man by the name of Marcus O'Sullivan. And he's a famous Irish miler. And I was a little bit in awe because here I am sitting across the table from this man who was a 4-time Olympian, a world champion, and he was then the coach, and now still is the coach at Villanova University. And he started telling his story about how he changed. Now, he had great success as a college student running in college, and then he went on to go have some great success in his early 20s. He went to the Olympics, 3 times, and he got to where he was about, he was probably like 32, 33, and he realized that the competition was changing. He wasn't the 20-something that he was when he had been in the Olympics before and when he had won world championships. And he knew that he needed to do something different. So he started working with a coach, and the coach said, "You've got to change your training style." And he said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "I've been running, like I go hard all out, 90-mile, weeks. I run really hard. I try to run, below sub 5 miles for my long runs, 13 miles. I try to run sub 5 miles. I can't change that pattern." And he said, "You really need to change it. You've got to shift to a whole different pattern of training." So O'Sullivan took a leap of faith and he said, "Okay, I'll try it." And he said, as he was going through this training, he thought, "I'm just running way too slow. I'm not running enough. I'm not gonna get better. I'm not running enough. I'm not running enough." But he said, "I'm gonna have faith in this process and know that I have to make some changes." As it turns out, he went on to go win another world championship and ran his fastest time at the age 35, a mile at age 35. This is a man who actually had more than 100 sub 4 miles, with a majority of those happening in his 30s after he had changed his training pattern. I tell you that because as you think about yourself as a leader, the number one skill that I see today for effective leaders is to embrace change and be adaptable. It's not always easy. It's not always comfortable. It pushes us outside of our zones, but we have to learn how to be different, how to change and be adaptable for our employees and for the people that report to us to do the same. So, as you can imagine, probably everybody a little bit has the date in their mind when they realized the pandemic was real. So in the case of O'Sullivan, that was a planned change. It was very purposeful, things that he knew he needed to change. I'm going to be putting in a new technology system at my university. I know it's going to be hard. It's a planned change. But oftentimes, things come at us that are not planned, and I call these the seismic shifts. And that's what the pandemic was. As much as we kind of could keep track of something that was coming, we didn't know how big and severe and how fast it was going to hit us, particularly here in New York. So seismic shifts generally create different kinds of reactions. Fear is one of them. Resistance, very strong resistance. Inability to act. Don't really know what to do next. Maybe some of you felt that way. In January of 2020, I recognized that something was happening with the pandemic. We had a number of students, international students, that I knew were not going to be able to travel back. So I pulled together a threat assessment team, our crisis management team, and we started talking about it. Now, back in 2008, when I was a dean of a business school, I had gone through a tabletop exercise for like the bird flu and the pandemic and everything else, and what you do at a university when that might happen. And I can tell you, I didn't use anything that I did back from 2008 this past year and a half. As much as you can plan, it's hard to kind of put your head around something that's so seismic, right? So by February, I escalated it to the highest level of threat that we have at the university. And by March, every single morning, every single day of the week, we had an emergency management team that started meeting by Zoom as we shut down the entire university completely, March 10th for our students, March 22nd for everybody else, and went to only having our public safety and essential personnel on campus at that point in time. By April, my emergency management team was starting planning on how we were going to reopen in August of 2020. It happened just like that. It went so fast. But out of that, and this is my gift to you, as I was working on this book, a whole litany of shift phrases were born. And, it got to be a lot of fun. This shift is real. I'm too old for this shift. You're shifting me. And so you can use any of these shift phrases. They come into play quite a bit as you're thinking about it. But these are the kinds of things that people talk about. We use this actually as kind of a joke to gain some levity as we were going through what turned out to be an extraordinarily serious crisis, particularly for our university. When you think about it, when change happens, whether you plan it or you don't plan it, what people are looking for from leadership is guidance, is vision, is where you're headed. How are we going to get there? The one thing that was very different about the pandemic than any other change that I've led in my career, and I've led a lot of changes, I kind of put myself out there as a change agent, is that this time, we didn't know how it was going to play out. When I teach executive MBA classes, I used to do an exercise with these executives, and they would be, anywhere between the ages of 35 and 55, had been in management for 10 years. And I would give them a puzzle. a child's puzzle. Actually, it was for like 10 and 11-year-olds. It was typically like a frog or a cat, something that had a lot of the same colors in it. But I would do two things. I would take away the edges, and I would take away the picture. And a puzzle that should have taken them 5 minutes as graduate students, as executives, generally would take them like 20 to 30 minutes. On the really hard ones, like the ones that had all black, like the black cats, they would often come to me and say, "Can't you give me the picture?" I'd be like, "No, I can't." The exercise was actually to get them to start thinking about how to solve puzzles without the usual rubrics that we use, the edges, the picture. So when you think about the pandemic, we were all solving a puzzle without the edges and without the picture. All of the conversations, the town halls, I had town hall after town hall after town hall after town hall. What I kept trying to do as a leader was to give them a couple of edges if I could, and give them a little bit of the picture. And I had to keep saying, I don't have all the answers. I don't know how all this is going to roll out. We're working on this every single day. Here's what I do know. Started giving those edges and started giving that picture. I was extremely fortunate. On my faculty, I had a disaster epidemiologist. He'd been studying pandemics his entire career. So I had a little bit more insight, I think, than many in terms of where the pandemic was headed and then also how it was going to play out, and still do today. But the thing that they still are craving for now is a continued filling in of that puzzle and giving them a picture of where we're headed. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what I call the cognitive spiral, or a think, feel, do spiral, because this is at the core of how you personally react to change and how others react to change. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story that occurred just a couple years ago, and I'll change the names. I had one of my executives, I'll call her Susanna, come to me and she said, "Chris," she said, I knew this about her, she said, "I've got a special needs child, a daughter. She's 25, and she said she lives at home with me, but she's high needs. And she said, I've got ways and money to pay for support for her, but I'm really having a difficult time finding anybody that will come in and be reliable, taking care of her. And she said, it's just really difficult for me to be in this high-level executive role and take care of my family. My son has been helping me out a lot with our daughter, with his sister, but he's now going to go off to graduate school, and I need to let him go do that." And she said, "Is there anything you can do to help me? Is there a different role that I can play?" And I said, "Susanna, absolutely. We'll figure out a different role that allows you to work from home, and you can call in maybe one day a month or something like that. You come to campus, but we can absolutely work that out." So we spent a couple weeks laying out a job description. And I said, "Hey, now is a good time, maybe we can merge two departments. And what do you think about taking your department and I'll have it now under the supervision of Lauren?" She said, "That's a great idea." So I talked with Lauren, got Lauren on board. We were going to merge the two departments. Susanna was happy because we figured out her job. She was going to be able to work at home and help with her daughter. And so we thought, this was a win-win. We've got it all solved. So we were going to roll it out, and Susanna says, "I want to call all of my direct reports." So she called, her first direct report. She said, "Hey, this is what's happening." And the person was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you. That's wonderful. I'm glad you get to stay home with your daughter and help take care of her, and you get to stay working with us. That's fantastic." And then that subordinate actually picked up the phone and called Lauren, her new boss, and said, "I'm so excited to be working with you. This is going to be great. Our teams are going to merge. We're going to have lots of new ideas and stuff like that. Fantastic." Susanna picked up the phone and called her second subordinate, her second direct report, told her the same thing and the reasons why. Jill, I'll call her, immediately burst into tears. I can't believe this is happening. Why are they doing this? How come I didn't get promoted? I don't want to work with that department. I quit. She immediately quit. They called me up and I was like, I thought this was a good thing. I thought it was like win, 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 win all the way around. And I had to catch myself because I knew what had happened. Whenever we're faced with a change, we immediately go into what is called a think, feel, do spiral. It can happen so fast you don't even recognize it. Sometimes we do recognize it, but we don't do anything about it. If you take anything away from this morning and from this conversation, the one thing you should know is that your thought process drives everything that you do. We had the same situation, two different people had two dramatically different think, feel, do spirals. The first subordinate said, this is great, I'm happy for my colleague, it's going to be fantastic, we're going to have new energy in the department under the leadership of Lauren, fantastic. The second subordinate said, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world, I quit. We did get her to come back, by the way. We did after we took her through. And what happens is that she had to go through a couple of these think, feel, do spirals. She had to get her head back into it and understand that that change was okay. So we all have positive scripts and we all have negative scripts. And your trick is to catch yourself on those scripts. So if you have to lead a change and you have a negative script, how do you think that's going to go with the people that report to you? They're not going to buy into it either. So I want you to take a moment and think of some scripts maybe that you've had in your head. They can be really simple ones. I want you to just try to think of a positive script and a negative script. Maybe it pertained even to coming to this conference, I don't know. I woke up this morning and I thought, gosh, most of the conferences I've been doing have been by Zoom for the last year and a half. And I woke up and I thought, God, I wonder if my blue suit still fits. And then I started getting a little bit worried about it. And then I immediately caught myself and I was like, oh, I've got a suit that's got a stretchy pants, so I'm good. It did fit, by the way, but a little tight. But think about some kind of change that perhaps you're facing at work, or maybe the one that you want to lead. Think about what your script is. And I want to go through just a couple things in a few moments around that. So hold on to those scripts. So one of the other things that happens when a change occurs and people are going through this think, feel, do cycle, think, feel, do, think, feel, do, think, feel, do, and it can go very fast. Oftentimes, they often start figuring out whether there's a fit or a misfit between the situation for them. So what we're seeing right now is you're probably reading a lot of the headlines, a lot of exit from different kinds of jobs because people are like, I don't really think this is a fit for me any longer. Susanna, when she was going through the struggles with her daughter, realized that being in a high-powered executive role that was very demanding wasn't a good fit for her any longer. And so she decided to try to do something about it and get her job changed, which we were able to do. But because of the pandemic, and because of so many things that are going on right now in society, and I'm sure you're facing this in law enforcement as well, a shift in the culture, a shift in people's reaction, to law enforcement, a shift in just demographics generally, a shift in the way that people want to work. Everybody's judging, is this a fit or is this a misfit? And most often when it's a misfit, the one reaction that people have, rather than doing what Susanna did, which was to try to change it, they leave. They leave that situation. So I'm sure somewhere in your career you've probably had a a thought in your mind as you've gone through it, like, oh my God, I just don't like this job anymore. I don't like that new boss or whatever. And then you either have to get that negative script out of your head or you've decided you're going to figure out a way out. The whole point of this is that when you lead change and when you're going through change, the first question we generally ask, something shifts, planned or unplanned. And the first question you ask is, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for me? And that's your think, feel, do cycle. Think, feel, do, think, feel, do, think, feel, do. Most people don't have control of that response. And so what happens is you end up with an automatic response. Jill's automatic response to Susanna not being her boss anymore was to quit. I quit. I quit. And what happens during adaptation is that you have an immediate response, and then you need to have you might have an intermediate response, but most importantly, you need to have that adaptive response. How are you going to positively respond to the change that you're facing? Think, feel, do, think, feel, do, think, feel, do. I think this way, I feel this way, I act this way, but is it the right way that I should be engaging in that? You have to get to the adaptive response. So every employee, every person that works for you goes through this kind of cycle whenever you introduce some kind of change. So you're not only dealing with your own responses to it, you're now having to think about how everybody else is responding to it and how you kind of pull them along with you as a leader. It is by far, I think, one of the hardest jobs is to get people to follow you during a period of change. So as you think about it, and I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, but you have to get your shift together as a leader to lead changes today. And as I said, change is going to be constant. Change is going to be constant. You get a new leadership at the top, they bring new ideas, then you're required to help lead those changes as well. So something to really think about as a leader with your team is, you really kind of focus and assess the situation. So going back to the pandemic, as we were faced with that, I couldn't put the parameters around it. I couldn't have that picture puzzle in front of me. So instead, I had to assess what I knew and what I didn't know. And as importantly, a big piece of that, though, was also focusing on our values. I put two things out front during our response to the pandemic. First and foremost, the health and safety of our community was number one. Number one. Above all else. Everybody knew it. All decisions were based on the health and safety of our community, period. Second is we have to be true to our mission and deliver a high-quality educational experience as best as we can for our students. That was it. Didn't get into anything else. Those two things, health and safety, deliver our mission. Gave people something to focus on from a leadership standpoint. Then it was a matter of kind of pulling the team together. Maybe some of you experienced this as well. As I said, we had crisis management meetings every single morning, 7 days a week, from March until July, till we knew we were going to be able to safely reopen. What was fascinating for me on this was that so many people that I thought were going to step up and help lead through the crisis pulled back and couldn't engage. It was too much for them. Goodness knows I wanted to hop in bed most of the time, pull up the covers and watch a Hallmark movie or Toddlers and Tiaras, something that would just kind of take my mind off of that, but I didn't have that opportunity. I didn't have that time. Pull the team together, and I think when you're leading through change, a lot of it is assessing what that team needs. Sometimes it was just me talking with somebody. Sometimes it was just, and kind of working through what the issues were. Sometimes it was simply me picking up the phone and saying, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. We had to act, obviously, very quickly. We had to talk about how to adapt as an entire university. We took 1,000 courses from being taught in person to being online in the span of 2 weeks. Some of our faculty had been at the university for 40 years and didn't even know how to turn on the computer. So we had to figure out how to quickly get them up to speed, get them trained. It was just nonstop kind of going through that adaptation. And then, as I mentioned, you have to just take some quick actions. The other thing that really became abundantly clear to me, and I knew this all along, but as a leader going through significant changes and leading significant changes, is you're not gonna please everybody. And you're gonna just have to make some of those hard decisions. And some of them will be unpopular, but you know it's the right decision to make. I told my board chair, I was like, I'm gonna be putting out an email on X, and I said, I can expect to get, at least 100 emails back that are gonna be upset about X. But it had to be done for the university. And that's part of, I think, leading change is actually assessing the situation, focusing on those values, and then really figuring out what hard decisions you have to make as a leader. Again, going back to it, you're leading a team, and in the midst of this, you still have your own think, feel, do spirals going while you're heading through it. So how do you actually thrive amidst constant change? A few lessons that I want to kind of leave you with. And I tell people this a lot. Actually, whenever we have new employees and new faculty, new staff come into the university, I always say to them, just kind of embrace the messiness of change. If you just relax and say, you know what, this isn't going to be linear, it's not going to be easy, it's going to be messy, it actually takes off a lot of the stress. I said this to a group of faculty that just came in, and I said, look, you know what, you're not going to know where the Starbucks is, you're not going to know where we keep the copy paper, you're not going to know where the pen supply is. So just take the time to be new. Don't get frustrated. Just take the time to adapt to a new environment. If you can think about embracing that messiness, you'll be a lot more relaxed. I didn't know all of the puzzle pieces. I didn't know the picture. Yes, I was stressed and I knew it was going to be messy, and that helped me really think through how to keep building it and putting those puzzle pieces in place. As leaders, and I hope maybe a year from now, if I ask you how many of you enjoy change, maybe I'll get a couple hands that rise up. But see the opportunity in change. Instead of having a negative script about the change, think about what's good. Think about what's good and where the opportunities are. So many lessons learned from the pandemic. For us, and I'm sure you probably have the same, we leapfrogged in some areas. I probably never in a million years could have gotten all of our faculty to get onto Zoom and learn how to do an online class. Just like that. They all have the skills. There was a real opportunity. We're not going to stay online. We're going to go back. We want to be in person. But there was a real opportunity in the change, even when it didn't seem like there was going to be. The other thing that's really important for leaders is to keep looking around the corner. As I mentioned, change is not going away. The demographic shifts are here to stay. The census data is there. We know exactly what the United States is going to look like for the next 18 years. We know technology is coming in a bigger way. Whether it's people you pull over who have a camera in their car, or they're pulling out their cell phones and videotaping things. We know that it's changing the way that we do our work. It's going to continue coming. What else is coming that's going to be affecting you as you think about your area, law enforcement? What else is coming your way? What are the things that you should be paying attention to? I mentioned this earlier, but you have to have the courage to change. You have to have the courage to lead change as someone today in a position. It's not going to be easy. I said this earlier, a little bit earlier, build your stamina. I wish I could run a sub 4 mile. I don't even think I can run a mile right now. But one of the things that Marcus O'Sullivan was doing was he was actually building up his stamina for the races when he went and changed his training program. We're not that different as leaders. We have to build up our energy, our stamina, our appetite, our excitement about change. You need to put that on your to-do list. Be self-reflective during change. Start catching your think, feel, do spirals. You know, if something's coming your way, stop and ask yourself how you're thinking about that. How are you thinking about your employees? It can go negative very fast, or it could go positive. One of my executives didn't get something to me. I could immediately think, wow, he's lazy. He's not getting any results. And then shoot him off a nasty email. Or I could think, gosh, that's not like him. I wonder what the issue is. And pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, do you need any help with that project? But I have to catch myself. I have to catch my spirals. And if I'm negative about something, there's nobody else that works for me or with me or beside me that's going to be positive about it. And lastly, as I've mentioned several times throughout, every single person is going to handle change differently, and it's our job to help bring them along. And when they're struggling with it, as leaders, it's our job to help them understand it. Maybe they won't appreciate it, but at least buy into it and go along with us for that ride. So let me just stop right there and see if anybody has any stories or scripts or comments or questions that they'd like to ask.
Just like yesterday, if you'd like to stand up or raise your hand, feel free. I have a question for Dr. Riordan. Sure.
So thank you very much for that. For everybody in this room that works for Suffolk County, and we are about to unleash a new time attendance payroll system in January, please remember these remarks. It's not going to be easy in the beginning, but we will get there and we'll get it done. So thank you. I'm going to remember all of this.
Well, and you know, it's a really great, I wish I'd known that I would have worked that in for you. You could have slipped it to me. So you think about something like that, something that is intended to be really good for the organization, right? To be more efficient, be more effective, to probably be more accurate, because I've gone through some of these recently. And again, you think this is great, but rolling out something that's new that requires everybody to be different and perhaps the process is different, you'll get some resistance, you're gonna get some grumbling. You know, so as much as you can embrace it, learn about it, and then help roll it out, is going to be completely needed to do something like that. It sounds so easy, a time and attendance, but it's not. So do remember this for sure.
What do you do when you're a leader and you're trying to roll out something new, but the organization that's the way it's always been done? Like, we don't change it. We've always done it this way. What do you do when you face something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Has anybody faced that? Every day. You know, so a lot of that it is true. So you go into these think, feel, do spiral, right? So the thinking is, we've always done it that way. Why do I need to change? And it's going to create a lot more work for me if I have to do something new. I don't like it. So you have to really kind of get into why people have that script. What's that resistance that's going along with putting in something new? And then what you start doing as a leader is you start talking that script through. You know, and you start having those conversations. Look, we're putting in a new time and attendance system. And what's been happening is they've been inaccurate. It's extremely costly for us to do it. You start kind of changing their script. And that's the communication that really has to go on with leading change. All of the communication really should be driven at, you're getting at all of those pressure points that people might be feeling and why they're resisting and not wanting to change. We're almost at the point of we've changed virtually everything at the university. And I would say the majority of my time is spent communicating and really spent trying to get people to buy into those types of changes and directly addressing some of those scripts that I know exist. Mm-hmm. Great question. Yes?
Sure.
How would you recommend change that might be forced upon you, whether it be through legislation, and you just can't grasp it as a leader, and neither can any of your subordinates grasp that same issue? How do you work around something like that, where you can't change how the organization feels about it? They're not listening, and you know it's going to cause harm. That change is going to cause harm. How do you embrace that? How do you get your subordinates to believe in that change and you don't believe in it yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it's kind of that unplanned change, right? That comes about. And I've been faced with a lot of legislation that's come into universities, and it's fundamentally either federally or state, and it's fundamentally changed something the way that we've done it. And it doesn't make sense a lot of times, when that happens. So, you've got a couple of things. It's just to be honest, quite frankly. This is something that is mandated, whether it's federally mandated or from the state. It's our duty and our obligation to roll this out. Let's talk about the ways that it's going to impact, our organization and what we can do to roll it out in as effective a way as possible. I don't think you have to say that. I don't think you want to be unauthentic and say, oh, this is great. But you have to be realistic and honest about it, and then also know that you do have to roll it out because it's a mandate. Generally, what I do in those situations, I try to lobby hard before it happens to try to get it changed before it hits at least in my case, the university, but we don't always have that capability of doing it. When the pandemic rolled out, I was very afraid, and I said this, I was very afraid the governor at the time was going to put some mandates in place for universities that were going to put us out of business. And so as chair of the board for CICU, we represent the 110 private institutions in New York. I worked with a provost from Cornell to put together a guideline that we hand-delivered basically to the governor's office on how higher education should restart, in the state of New York. They did come out with a lot of strong mandates, and I ended up having to submit 15 different restart plans because we're like a mini city. And I had guidelines for my daycare center, I had guidelines for my gym, I had guidelines for my transportation system, I had guidelines for retail, I had guidelines for my dining, which is like a restaurant, I had guidelines for the residence halls, which were like, a hotel. And so at least we were able to, I think, manage the process enough to be able to do it, but it created a lot of work. And my job as a leader was to say, these are state mandates, we need to follow them. Let's figure out the best way for us to implement these processes that we have to put in place, and tried to stay as positive about it and help and support my people that were rolling it out as much as I possibly could. You just have to be really authentic and honest, and we're in this together type of a thing. You bet. Yes?
I should have raised my hand because I actually like change and believe in change, but I don't believe in change just to change.
Right.
Do you have any stories of experience where change wasn't the right thing? You're making a very positive spin. It's not always a positive spin. You have a negative story about things where you shouldn't change.
I think, I don't know your name, but just as he was mentioning, there's a lot of changes that have come through, I think from a mandated perspective, from the state as well as federally, that have not been positive. And some of those, because they're mandated, you have to actually go through it. I don't know that I've personally led a change because I really spend a lot of time strategically thinking through the change before I will bring it forward if it's something significant for the university. One of the things that is also, though, really important to remember is the pace of change and how much change people can actually tolerate. So while we've planned a lot of different changes, periodically I've had to pull back and say we're going to hold on that change for another year because we just can't, the community can't handle that much change going forward. I would say if you're strategic and thoughtful about a change, then hopefully nobody's implementing change just for change's sake. But that does happen, for sure. It's a good point.
It sounds like you saying that communication is really the key here, to communicate to your team and to everyone about why the change is happening, or
Yes.
even to students. But do you feel, as you've worked with students in many universities and many settings, that social media, cell phones, that kind of stuff, has caused them, their ability to communicate to be less, like to be worse?
No. They actually get out communication faster than we can sometimes, which is also important to understand. You know, when things go out on Twitter, they go out on Facebook, or they go out on Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok now, of course. It gets out there very quickly. And so I think you have to be really prepared for that speed to market, as they might call it, or speed to communication, and how to get a handle on that and make sure that it's I don't want to say a controlled narrative, but at least the narrative that you want out there, because it can spiral out of control very quickly if it's not.
Is there in-person communication? Do you think that's hindered at all by it?
No, I would say when you're thinking about communication around change, you got to think about it all.
Yeah.
You're going to do social media, you're going to do in-person, you're going to do written. You can't say it enough. I mean, saying something about a significant change like the time and attendance, you need to be communicating about that 6 months before it starts and constantly communicating about it. We have websites with FAQs and everything else for major changes that are going on. But I would say, you know, besides planning the change, the communication strategy that goes along with it, we always have a robust communication strategy that hits it all, and we are like repeating it over and over and over and over again, just so that hopefully something sticks. And with the students, what we found, and just I would say the younger generation, overall, they hear everything in sound bites. They're not going to read a one-page memo. You know, it's like you've got 30 seconds to catch somebody's attention, and so you got to think about those sound bites that you want to be putting out there regarding your changes. Yeah. Yes.
You talked about having meetings daily during the height of the pandemic. Now that that is now ebbed away, how often do you have those staff meetings? And is it more of a monologue or a dialogue? And how many topics do you cover in each? And is there any information you can share with that?
Yeah, great question. So it is not a monologue. It actually is very much of an executive conversation. So I have 10 people that are part of my executive team, and we meet once a week, and all executives kind of put forward the agenda items. And what we do is, just so we don't get into this, informational items we send to each other by email on Sunday night or Monday morning, just so that they can have that. And everything that we put on our agendas for our executive team meetings are strategic decisions that we have to make, or discussion items where somebody might need input from the entire team. The way that I've set up my executive team, we're all on like cell phones with each other and text and call and that sort of thing. I have formal meetings with each executive one-on-one at least every 2 weeks, but sometimes I'm talking with some of them daily. My vice president for health, safety, and wellness, he and I text or talk daily just because of everything that's happening so quickly and some of the mandates that come down, so we stay in pretty close conversation with one another. I would say the more that you can really create the dialogue among the folks that work with you, the better off you are. I never pretend to have all the answers. And particularly when we're leading big changes, we'll kind of like help each other think through what are all the issues that are associated with those. And if you've got the right people sitting around the table and you've got some good diversity, you're probably going to get some insight into how people are thinking about the changes that you might want to lead.
You said you don't have all the answers, but what if you make a mistake? What if you give the wrong edges of that puzzle?
Yeah.
And you realize you were wrong? Then what happens?
I basically say I'm wrong and apologize for sure. We try to be so careful and not put information out there, particularly during the pandemic, because we did not want to create more fear from people. And if we weren't sure how we were going to be rolling something out, we would say, we don't have the answer to that right now, but next week we'll do it. We held a lot of town halls. Anytime something major is going on, I think it's always great to have, and they were not in person, obviously, they were by Zoom. We held a lot of town halls and would take questions, and of course, people putting things in chat. We've got people that are chatting them, and if we didn't have the answer right then, we would say it, and then we would come back and, answer them at a later point in time. But, the other thing I probably should be in there is you need to be extraordinarily humble as a leader. And if you've made a mistake, just own it, be authentic, and say, I goofed up, and I'm sorry, and here's how we're going to fix it. Yeah.
Any final questions? Yeah, sure.
So you talk a lot about your team and everybody that you surround yourself with. Being a leader at your level, what is something that you look for in those team members that you pick? Or what process do you go through to say this is the right fit for the right vision and what I want for my team?
Yeah, it's a great time. We spend a lot of energy and effort on selecting our leadership team. The executives, and then I've got a president's cabinet that's made up of about 35 people. So everybody that's kind of as part of that group, whenever there's a new position or a position opening and we're hiring somebody new, they go through a lot of selection process, which involves not only meeting with me, but they meet with the other team members. I have them meet with our board if it's an executive level. They usually get worn out over like a 2 to 3 day interview period. It's a multiple step process. So we'll screen them, then we'll do kind of an initial interview with the selection committee, and then they come and we wear them out for 2 or 3 days, and then there's usually a final interview with me and with some of the board members to make sure. And what I'm looking for is, again, a lot of these leadership skills. I mean, just given everything that we're facing, we know change is just going to be constant for universities, and I think it's probably constant for law enforcement as well. And so I do talk a lot about adaptability and people's capability of adapting, and then also being able to lead the changes within their organization. I also look for very strong communication skills, because that is the key to getting other people to really buy into some of the changes that are needed. And then certainly, their integrity and their ethics are high on my list as well. And really the last piece, I think, too, that we look for is just their fit. If somebody, as I mentioned before, if somebody feels like they're going to be a misfit, whether it's with the team or with the university or our culture, it's not going to work out. So we do look for some element of fit with them and them with us. Yeah. We spend a lot of time, because if you've ever hired somebody that has not worked out, it's very painful, very painful. I mean, I've unfortunately had to fire people in my career, but it's painful for the team to have somebody that's not a good fit. So we do spend a lot of time on that.
Just to follow up on that, often in law enforcement, we don't fire, right?
Yes.
We shelve people, we put them inside, we figure out a way to keep them in the organization. So how do you manage change when you have people that probably shouldn't be there any longer?
Yes. Yes. So, I have 5 unions, and I have tenured faculty. And tenure means that they don't have to change. So I have some faculty that are, octogenarians and have been there for 50 years, and I don't need to change, kind of a thing. So we've done a few things. We actually, you can job shape, which is, I think, a common answer when somebody's not able to do something, shape a job that they can then move into. But we actually have started working a lot with our unions and really getting them to kind of buy into where we're headed from a change management standpoint. And it's interesting as we go through this. So I did end up mandating vaccines for our students, and then I negotiated a vaccine mandate with our 5 unions. And we spent a lot of time really talking through what this meant. And they have members that did not want to be vaccinated, and so we were able to work out a system and a way to implement that where it was okay for the ones that did not want to get vaccinated, and those that wanted to do it were, the ones that are not vaccinated have to be tested every 2 weeks. So another one that we're working on right now, and this is the big one, is we have a really strong focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the university. And so I rolled out a diversity certificate program. We actually also partner with a lot of the school districts and roll it out in the school districts around us. We've had more than 1,000 people go through it. But if we really want to be a model of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I really would love to have everybody at least be exposed to some kind of diversity education. And the unions have been a little bit resistant to that, but we've been working on it for the last 2 years, and with just so much movement going on, through the university and so much focus on it, they're now starting to put it on the table in terms of us writing it into our contracts with the union. So I think you have to get extraordinarily creative, on how it might not be the path that you thought you were going to take when you were going to be leading a change. And I would also say, don't give up. Because, there are ways to kind of just, I think, have the conversations and talk through the importance of it, and at least get enough people to buy into it where you can implement it. I don't know if that helped or not. Yeah. Yes?
There's a quote by Adelphi Suffolk. He says, the more things change, the more the stay the same. Have you ever had a situation where you thought that there was a change that was going to completely fix everything or change it, and then you realize basically it's the same, everything stayed the same? Some type of technical change or policy change or that really didn't do what it was supposed to do?
Yes. I think people find workarounds sometimes, whether it's to a policy or whatever, because they're just comfortable with the status quo. And oftentimes what I've found is that it really is contingent upon the leader in that area, on whether it ultimately ends up changing. And so on something that's been, we've had a few things just in terms of policies where we were trying to roll it out and create, a more positive environment. And a lot of times people just entrenched and they just kind of dug in and kept doing it the same. So I usually go in and we work with that group just in terms of how they can implement the policy and kind of where we're headed. You almost have to go back to square one and start that change management process all over again. I have a counter quote for you to your quote. I love that one because there is some element of truth to it, but it says, all things change, nothing abides, into the same river, one cannot step twice. So it really is, I think, a matter of taking the time and patience to really think through, A, was that change needed? Or B, do I need to go back and kind of do the change management to actually make that positive change, I guess, that was needed? Questions?
All right, well, we want to thank you, Dr. Riordan. This was really informative, and I think everyone would agree that now they're going to embrace change in their lives, so.
Got a few more hands that time.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all.